Donald J. Trump is now president of the United States. President Obama is the ex-president.
Niko House, welcome back to the show.
Hey man, I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on. I wanted to have somebody on to kind of, just riff about the election. This has, been a really crazy election, and the whole election season has been, and the results were pretty unexpected, at least in regards to what most pollsters thought was going to happen. So just kind of wanted to go through it today a little bit. But to open it up, what are your kind of takeaways? What are your thoughts on what happened Tuesday?
Those oh so trusty pollsters, right? Talking about how popular she was all of a sudden. I'm like,
magically.
I couldn't. First of all, let me just be upfront. I thought that Trump was going to win. I said the only way that he could lose is if the Democrats cheat. And that's not to say that they didn't try. I want to be clear about that. There's a logical fallacy like, oh, the Democrats didn't cheat and y'all thought they would cheat. I'm like, well, no. Unsuccessfully cheating is still a form of cheating. So I thought that would be the only way that they won. But I also said that they would have to be on a unified front to do that. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. But for her to go from the most unpopular VP in history to, all of a sudden she's super likable and everybody's considering voting for her didn't make any rational sense. Like, I know, you and I know, like, the United States population is probably the most propagandized in the world. But even for the US, that's a huge leap. It took like 4 years of meme PR recovery to resuscitate Joe Biden's career, right? You're going to tell me that the most unpopular VP in history is all of a sudden going to beat the most popular incumbent in history in a month and a half when they were hiding her? It didn't make any rational sense. The only polls that did make sense to some degree were the swing state polls, where it was showing constantly that Trump was either beating her or it was within the margin of error. And I would argue that in a situation in swing states where it's in the margin of error and people are not enthusiastic about the candidate, it's almost always going to go to Republicans, because we know Republicans generally tend to win when the turnout's lower than usual. And in this particular case, the turnout for Republicans for early voting was 1.7 million voters higher than the Democrats. So I just didn't see a legitimate path to victory for Kamala. I did see the excuses that were going to come that afterwards. Oh, it was racism. Oh, it was sexism. It was this, it was that. But the reality of the situation is Kamala isn't the only one who lost. They lost the Senate. They still don't have the House, and they lost an extra seat in the House, and no one flipped anything.
Yeah, it looks like they're probably going to lose the House. They're still counting votes right now, but it's like right on the threshold. The Republicans are about to take it.
So they have the House. They had the House going into the election.
Right. They
added a seat that night to the House, and it's looking like they're about to add one more, which is like, so if it's racism and sexism, like all that racism and sexism transferred into Kamala, like, or into your Senate, your House elections. Also, why did all the gubernatorial Republican incumbents win so handedly?
Well, actually, when I had Noam Chomsky on years ago, he was citing that as a point of why the whole Russian collusion thing made no sense in 2016, because did Russia also help Republicans win the House and Senate in 2016? So these sort of excuses that they come up with, it's inconsistent. It doesn't make sense.
And in the U.S., we're conditioned to forget that local elections exist, that Senate, gubernatorial, House, we're conditioned to believe that anything having to do with an election is all about the presidential candidate. And it's fallacious and it's dangerous, because what ends up happening is you don't even realize, like, whenever somebody gets cheated, for example, ballots get taken out, because like I've literally seen that happen with Tim Canova's election. I watched ballots get taken to a place they weren't supposed to be at. And he got cheated twice. But the first time with Tim Canova, I was trying to explain to everybody, I said, you guys are forgetting, if Tim Canova was cheated and there was ballots literally taken out and shredded, because that's what happened, that means Bernie Sanders was on that ballot. You get what I'm saying? So it's like there's a reverberating impact that comes with election rigging that people don't even think about, because they're so concerned with the presidential election that they don't even realize how certain that maybe somebody is rigging at the congressional level. That happens, and it could actually affect the outcome of the presidential election in some ways. So I would say that for our country, there were a lot of people that voted and they signed Trump's name, they circled Trump's name or whatever, the bubble, they put that bubble beside Trump, but it had nothing to do with Trump, really. I feel like it was an FU to the system. They did not, I mean, when you look at Dearborn, Michigan, full of Arabs, full of Muslims, I thought that they were going to mostly vote for Jill Stein, and a lot of them did.
Yeah, she got like, I think 20% or something.
Yeah, which is a very good number for a third party candidate. But Trump got like 40%. That's insane. And
Rashida Tlaib also got elected by a huge margin too. So it suggests that there's at least a few thousand crossover votes, people who voted for Trump and Tlaib.
So she got over 77% of the vote. That is insane, bro. She had like 5 people running against her. And the important thing to remember about Rashida Tlaib is that she was one of the 3 or 4 quote unquote progressives that AIPAC ran a candidate against them in the primary. She's the only one who won.
Yeah. I think that suggests she's going to be a real target now. Like they're going to be investing everything in getting rid of her in a couple of years.
Yeah, you could even make an argument that they could they could get rid of her district or like just change the outcome of it or change the demographics of it, which is a possibility, but I don't know how, because if she's winning 77%, it's a lot. Like, I don't know how you can or gerrymander that. 77, I don't know how to gerrymander 77%, but and the fact that once again, like Bowman, who flip-flopped on genocide, got beat. I'm not going to say that was the whole reason he got beat, because he wasn't doing anything for New York while he was in Congress. But maybe if you would have stuck to your guns in that regard, people would have been more inclined to go out and vote for you. Cori Bush was flip-flopping on the genocide argument, got beat. She didn't have room to play, but she played. But Rashida Tlaib, they ran somebody, AIPAC candidate against her, smacked them while she was getting trashed in Congress, like just rhetorically making her pull her Palestinian flag down, openly calling out Joe Biden and Kamala, and she wins her primary and her general election decisively. But like you said, but if that's the case, why did Dearborn go for Trump? That doesn't make any sense. Oh yeah, it does. Because genocide is a red line for more people than they thought.
Yeah, and this was an argument that was happening for weeks and months before the election with all these liberals on X, where they're saying, well, Trump's going to make genocide worse. But they didn't seem to account for the fact that the incumbent party is the one who is helping Israel commit the genocide right now. And if they're killing kids, I don't know how, like, are you going to make the kids more dead? So it's just a rejection of the incumbent party that is complicit in the crimes currently happening.
My friend Nick Cruz from RBN, he said it plainly. He said saying that you got to vote for saying that a vote for Trump would make genocide worse is genocide denial, effectively, because it is literally just ignoring the fact that Gaza is already flattened. Like, oh man, they're going to flatten Gaza if Trump wins. It already happened. They have a phrase in Portuguese. It's já era. Like, it's already happened, bro. Why are we even talking about this? How is that even a part of the conversation? It's like you're not realizing. There was somebody who commented on Twitter, I hope that Trump turns Gaza into a parking lot. And he's not, like, as a consequence for Arabs in Michigan voting for Trump. And I'm like, you don't even realize you're wishing for something that has already happened, which is why Trump was picked by them to begin with. It is a lack of self-awareness and really the lack of awareness of what's going on in the world that's caused the Democrats and liberals to be faced with this level of disappointment, which they should have expected. Like, it's only I guess it's disappointment for a lot of them because they didn't expect this. And I'm thinking to myself, if you've been talking to people and reading the news and hearing what people have said and are saying, then this result was expected. The only thing I didn't expect was for Trump to win the popular vote. I was not expecting that. I'm not going to lie.
Well, again, this was a really historic election. This is the biggest GOP win from a electoral perspective since 1988, when Bush Sr. beat Dukakis, and it's only the second time since then that Republicans won the popular vote. So this was really a historic landslide.
Yeah, it was a mandate, and once again, There are some people who are saying it's a mandate for Trump, and I don't really necessarily codify it as that. I think it's a mandate against the system. I think that because when you once again we look at who it wasn't just Kamala who lost, Republicans won. Also, for example, in Missouri, deeply red, Josh Hawley wins again, which was expected. What was not expected, however, was for Missourians to vote for another minimum wage increase. What was not expected was for another initiative in Missouri for legalization of marijuana to get passed. A pro-abortion initiative gets passed. A denial of more police benefit funding gets passed in deep red Missouri. So it isn't progressive policies that are causing y'all to lose. It isn't that Americans don't like progressive policies. It isn't that they just don't like Kamala. It's like, or they love Trump. It's really just they just don't like y'all. They do not like Democrats. Y'all convinced them last election that Trump was the boogeyman. They believed you. Then over the last 4 years, something happened, and while everybody was paying attention, where they realized,
I think a few things happened.
well, yeah, a few things happened, but I'm just saying, like, there was just something in their mind that helped them realize a few things, like you said. Holy shit, yeah, Trump might have been the worst thing to happen, but y'all are actually worse than he is. And that is what the Democrats have to reckon with. And they're still deflecting instead of actually addressing the reality that maybe we are the worst thing that have happened to this country, or at least that's the perspective that most Americans have. And we have to do something about that instead of playing this identity politics BS that they're doing, the blame game that they're doing, the victimhood.
January 6th, ranting about a 3-hour riot for 4 years.
Yeah, yeah. Or Russia, the whole Russiagate thing still. They tried to say that Russia was calling in a fake bomb threats in Georgia, which I knew at that point. I'm like, oh man, Trump's about to win Georgia, and if that's what they're doing, right? But Kamala didn't do better in a single county, a single precinct than Biden did. That says a lot.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and there's a lot of questions there for why there was such a lack of turnout for Democrats. I mean, again, I think it was just a rejection of their policies overall. But something that we've heard the last few days is that there was 13 million people who allegedly showed up for Biden and then just didn't show up this time, and that's been a real question mark. And there's been a lot of people pointing to the 2012 and 2016 elections and saying, there's a pretty solid trend line of about 65 to 70 million Democrat votes. And then in 2020, it spiked up to 81 million. So where did all those people come from and where did it go? And that's kind of, again, raising some questions again about the 2020 election.
Yeah, because I mean, it once again brings into question the incredulous nature that I feel is intrinsic in the 2020 election. Because of the circumstance of the pandemic, a lot of shenanigans were at least possible to engage in, right? The mail-in ballots, the absentee ballots.
I mean, that's the thing is like, I'm not necessarily like an election denier or anything. It's just that given the unique nature of that election and again, the fact that there was just so many more votes that popped up and now weren't replicated, it seems to warrant some form of investigation to try to understand what happened there.
Because once again, which you can see in lawsuits all around the country, really, but once again, because it isn't just Trump that would have been affected if that's the case, right? It's like
I think Republicans actually picked up some of the vote in 2020. I have to check, but
I'm sure they did. I mean, cheating doesn't really work one side, right? I think that everybody should know that. Like, both parties try to cheat. It's usually whoever's better at it that wins. Like, but my point, but like you said, it didn't only affect Trump. It could have affected some Democrats at the local level. It could have affected some Republicans. It could have affected something as simple as a commissioner's race. We don't know. That's the problem. And we have a right to know. That's because like you said, I'm not an election denier. I just want to know that the shit went right. What's wrong with that? How is that I
think what's it's confusing Democrats now too, right? Because they were sort of relying on that same anti-Trump vote. And do you know who Alan Lichtman is? He's this guy who like successfully predicted basically 10 out of the past 10 presidential elections. So he got this one wrong. He said Kamala Harris was going to win. and he he went on a stream last night trying to explain why he got that wrong. And I personally think that there's some flaws in his system because he basically he has these keys to
He's the one that
success.
does the points, right?
Yeah. So he was saying that there was
I did a breakdown of his. So went on CNN and he was doing those points, and I did a breakdown of why he was wrong earlier this election.
Yeah, I mean, he totally misjudged them, right? He said the economy was good. He said that Ukraine was a military success. He said there was no social unrest. Like he just
yeah, when he said there was no social unrest, I'm like, hold up, didn't a bunch of college kids just get the shit beat out of them?
Right.
Because of the Palestine thing? Like, that's not
Yeah,
social
just
unrest.
he ignored that. He ignored inflation. He also ignored the the COVID protest as well. I think that should count.
I think he should too, yeah.
So he went on last night trying to explain why he got things wrong, and he made a couple good points. He said that given the fact that Democrats attacked Joe Biden after the first debate, that was kind of unprecedented, and Kamala Harris was just given the nomination without having to do a primary. So those are pretty valid explanations. But he just went on to blame racism and sexism and disinformation. He said that Elon Musk is spreading more disinformation than anyone could possibly do, anyone else could possibly do. But the funny thing,
he definitely does spread misinformation, but like they weren't saying that when Mark Zuckerberg was doing it.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when they're spreading disinformation the other way, that's fine.
Exactly.
And so like in racism and sexism weren't a factor in any other elections in U.S. history. Like when Obama ran in 2008, that wasn't part of the factor.
Yeah, man. And I gotta be, and I know I guess because I'm black, I feel like I have to address this. I actually do believe that in some degree, I'm willing to listen to an argument that racism and sexism can play a factor in an election. I'm willing to entertain that argument, very much so. But like you said, when we had Obama was an interesting case study. So like let's not talk about after, because I don't like Obama. I hate him actually. But let's just talk about who he was and what we knew about him. He already had written his book talking about his racial ambiguity and how it had actually been an issue for him growing up, how it's something that he was always wrestling with, how he never really fit in. Which part of the family he was actually raised by and how that affected his experience and his mindset. He didn't hide from his ambiguity. And yet he still won, like 98% of the black vote. So why didn't that happen? Because Kamala did hide. She's been hiding. She ran on being black. She threw a bunch of black celebrities out there in front of us, but didn't actually explain to us what her black experience was. Not really. And when she kept talking about the black side of her life that just all of a sudden became a part of her story in the last 4 or 5 years, we never saw any pictures, because she's posting pictures of her Indian family all the time. We never saw any pictures. We never saw any videos, nothing like that, right? And I'm gonna tell you something, Southern black people, when you keep talking about all the stuff you were doing with your black family, all these black experiences you had, all the cookouts you've been to, so to speak, if they're not seeing any family, there's like something visceral that will like, hold on, where are all your black friends at then? Where are they? Because you keep talking about this and we haven't seen any proof, but you're still posting your family from the Indian side. And so there's a disconnect there that makes people go, I can't really trust you. You sound like you capping. And I feel like that was a huge factor. Even though I think it was 93 or 94% of black women voted for her. That's not, I think it was like 99 for Obama.
Well, and Trump, I think, got about 21% of black males, I believe.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, comparatively speaking, if it was like a racial thing specifically and exclusively, I feel like so is it black people are more racist, like they're racist against themselves, or like what is it? Because I know that a lot of black people have woken up since Obama, but not enough. I'll be honest with you. There's still a lot of black people who still believe in Obama. It's a little bit disconcerting, but whatever. But the reality is, Obama wasn't even raised in the same environment with the same experiences as the majority of black people, and we still accepted him at that time because he was genuine about his own black experience. We never actually knew what Kamala's black experience was, and that played a huge factor, in my opinion, in her losing a lot of the black vote. I don't feel like Trump necessarily gained it all the time. I feel like Kamala was losing it because people didn't know who she was. And they're like, but you keep wanting me to vote for you because I'm black, and you're black, allegedly. But when we ask you, okay, cool. We don't know about your black experience. We don't really know if you're actually black. So tell us what you're going to do for black people. And every other coalition, she could come up with something she would do for them. Us, we got to take what we get from the leftovers from the other coalition she was willing to campaign for.
Just going back to this Lichtman guy again, so that these were his excuses, right? He said that Trump was normalizing racism and sexism in a way that hadn't been done before, that Elon Musk was spreading disinformation like way ever before. But the most interesting part of that whole conversation was that him and his son kept coming back to they could not understand how these 13 million votes, just disappeared. They kept saying it's unprecedented. They couldn't understand it. They're confounded by it.
Harris ended up with 13 million less votes than Biden did in 2020. That was a 19% decrease, the largest decrease in votes between candidates of the same party, excluding obviously when there's a third party with greater than 5% of the vote, since 1967. That was Ford, who lost 8 million votes from...
You mean 1976?
That's what I meant. 1976, who lost 8 million votes compared to Nixon in 1972, which was...
But Nixon won in a landslide, don't forget. Whereas comparing the last two elections are two close elections.
Sure.
Votes should have been about the same.
Right, and that was a 20% decrease in voting. Yeah.
Let's cut to the chase, Sam. You did great research on this.
Yeah.
The chase is there was an enormous fall off.
Right.
Close to 20% of the Biden vote in 2020 as compared to the Harris vote in 2024. And there is no modern day historical precedent for that. And that is an enormous mystery of this election, and has led a number of people who've written to me saying there must have been some shenanigans with the voting technology. And they've even, and I don't understand it, and I'm not endorsing it, even come up with technical explanations about how it wouldn't be that difficult for the Trump campaign or the Russians to do it. I'm not endorsing any of that. I'm not a technician. I have no idea. But I am endorsing Sam's research. That's something strange, unprecedented in terms of the fall off in voting.
Seattle's Susie Q says, remember Trump talking about a secret? Remember how he kept telling his supporters that he, quote, didn't need their votes? Yeah, that was a weird... I know Metro Maddow did a big piece about that.
Very weird. Look, as I said, I've had all kinds of communications claiming that there were ways of rigging the vote. I'm not buying into that. I'm not advocating that. I don't have the skills to evaluate it. I'm not going to buy into conspiracy theories, but it's certainly out there among smart people.
Right. I just think there's a lot of question marks that, I mean, we may never have answers to, but they're just giant question marks out there about this election that just kind of make me keep going like, huh? What? You know what I mean?
Huge question marks. This election does not make sense.
And people
maybe
respond.
There's a logical explanation. Maybe there isn't.
Right. And people respond to that saying, oh, you're too in your liberal bubble. No, the numbers just don't make sense.
So, I think this is going to be something that a lot of Democratic consultants and strategists are like trying to figure out for the next few years. So again, it just goes back to, I think there should be some kind of audit or investigation to understand what happened in the 2020 election. Where do these people come from? Where did they go? And, that would really be the Democrats' benefit, right? Because if those are all real voters and they exist and Biden reached them in 2020, how can you activate them again? So,
you know what? That's a good but it's exactly that. If they are real voters, if they do exist, if those votes are legitimate, because if we just don't know. We don't understand. We don't know. Usually, I would say you could point to a lack of excitement. Right. But apparently Kamala was breaking all these individual donor records and raised more than Joe Biden and da-da-da-da. Okay.
Yeah, she outspent Trump, I think, by $300 million.
Yeah. And so where are they at? So where are those people at? Because the boogeyman didn't disappear. And this time there were more there was more ability to actually send in absentee ballots, mail-in ballots in other states. There was no pandemic stopping people from voting or making people feel uncomfortable with going to the polls.
Right.
Like there should have been more based off of what we understand from 2020 or based off what we were told from 2020. But the fact that you got 13 to 15 million voters or however much it was like that just didn't show up. I would be interested to know who those voters voted for, right? And if we can't like to verify, like, oh man, if that person voted for somebody else, if that person voted their party, if they chose to sit out all the elections, they chose to vote just
Yeah, I mean,
for.
I guess that's what it's suggesting is that they never voted before the 2020 election and they sat out this election. So again, just
So, and there you
odd.
go. That indeed, I 100% agree. It warrants an investigation, and that's not election denial. And so I live in Brazil, guys. I live in Rio. I live in a country where they can basically verify the like definitively verify the election in like 2 days. Like they already have the results after the first day, easily. But after about 2 days, maybe 2 days and some change, because you even have to mail. If you can't vote, you have to actually mail in something to explain why you can't, but you still have to pay a fine. So like everybody votes. You can verify it in about 24 to 48 hours. Brazil is not a rich country. Okay. Bolivia, same thing. Venezuela, same thing. So why can't the wealthiest country in the world audit and verify their elections without without the person who is asking to do the auditing being accused of being anti-democratic, being an election denier? That's like gaslighting to the highest degree. And in my opinion, it's anti-democratic. I feel like every party, every person should want to know with 100% certainty that every vote was counted.
Just going back to the whole genocide thing too, this was another shift that we saw where a lot of, Democrats still won the young Zoomer vote, but there was a big shift over to Republicans. And I have to believe that the genocide played some factor in that, right? When we saw all these college protests and it's just, I think a lot of people weren't going to vote for the party who is helping commit that genocide. And that really, again, shot Democrats in the foot, not just with Muslim Americans, but with younger Americans as well.
Yeah, 100%. And because I feel like, I feel like it's the truth. Over the last 4 years, a lot of people turned legal voting age, right? So when you're talking about that 15 million, where are the people that turned legal voting age and why didn't they come out for the Democrats in the way that they would normally come out? Because they were watching a genocide unfold on social media. And even though, like you said, a lot of them may have went to Trump, a lot of them just didn't vote because how could I possibly? Like, I'm not going to participate in my. Could you imagine your first ever vote being cast for genocide? Like that is insane, and a lot of people cannot live with that, and I respect it. As far as the Arab community is concerned, and them voting for Trump, I feel like they, like, especially once again in Detroit, after Kamala literally said, if you want Trump to win, just say so. I was like, bro, you did not just say that in Michigan.
Well, how many times did she do the I'm speaking thing? Was it like 3 different occasions?
3 or 4 times. But the most recent one was literally in Michigan,
right,
in Detroit, right outside of Dearborn. Okay. Like this was your chance. And it's like there's something in her. She can't control herself. She has no self-control nor self-awareness. And it's almost, to me, it feels like they literally said, oh, okay, fine. Since you think we want to vote for Trump or we want Trump to win, let's not make a liar out of you. And that's exactly what they did. That because a Democrat, I don't know if you know this, but a Democrat has not won an election without winning Michigan, I think, since Bill Clinton, the first time or the second time he won. It was one of those 2 times. And that's the only time in my lifetime that a Democrat has won without Michigan. And they always end up losing, usually by a few votes. Kamala actually got her ass kicked in Michigan, comparatively speaking to other Democrats. And the moment that she lost, once again, it goes back to what you said about my guy and these points. And he's like, I can't believe I didn't see this coming. And it's like, bro, by your own metrics, all the stuff was there for you to figure out that this wasn't going to go the way you thought it was. But it's like liberals purposely ignore sometimes this, like what's in front of them because it's inconvenient for the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, and I think also we're seeing just these class divisions as well, right? Because these people who are in the news media and academia, and we saw this in the polling, the exit polls too, because Kamala Harris actually did see a grow over Joe Biden from white college-educated voters, white college-educated women, I believe specifically. So I think it's just like this sort of like class dynamics happening where these sort of elitist snobs are gravitating towards the Democratic Party, and they don't like the working class, they don't care what they
Yeah.
think, and they just think that they're wrong because, oh, the government says that the economy is doing fine, so it must be doing fine. And they don't actually ever, they don't, the grocery prices doesn't register with them, so they don't think anything of it, or they don't,
Yeah.
go out applying for jobs and apply for months and never hear back from anybody.
Exactly, like that. Maybe the effects, the negative impacts of the economy are affecting them in minuscule, innocuous ways. Yeah, my energy bill went up a little bit, but I got a huge raise, so
Right.
whatever, right, for them. But for everybody else, like for example, my mom got a raise, and her healthcare went up, right? Because she was making more money, and because healthcare just keeps going up and deductibles keep going up. So it was like she ended up like losing money after getting a raise
Right.
because taxes went up, healthcare went up, and healthcare isn't post taxes. Yeah, no, it's pre tax, not post tax. So it's like, what the hell? And
Right.
once again, rent still going up. And for those people who are lucky enough to buy a house, more power to you. The majority of the country is not in a position to buy a house with a loan that actually makes sense. And it's like whenever working class people speak up about these issues, it's like the elites look at us with disgust. Like, how dare you call out the reality of the country? I don't want to be reminded of the filth, right? Like, I don't want to be reminded about you poor people and your problems.
Well, again, they just think it's disinformation too, right? They're like, oh, but the stock market is doing great, and these unemployment levels are down, and this jobs report is good. Actually, the last jobs report was the worst one
It was
since
false, right?
the October one. It was the worst one since like 2020.
But they ended up coming out and saying that they had cooked up
Well, yeah,
unemployment
so a
numbers.
couple things. They typically actually revise those things down, so they'll release them and they get like a bunch of press, but then like a month or two later they'll say, actually we didn't create all those jobs we said we did. But
Yeah.
there was a really big one, I think back in August, and if it said there was a huge spike in jobs, but if you break it down, it was from reported growth in government jobs that really drove that. So like private sector, non-farm, whatever, those actually went down, but it was like this huge spike in the jobs that the government said it was creating.
That's what they do, man. And it's like, and to get a government job, it's a lot of times who you know type of situation. I mean, it's like that with a lot of jobs, but government job definitely. And the government, if they want to create a spike in jobs at that moment, they can, right? But to make themselves look like they're growing jobs, but once again, if you were living out here in the real world, you know that wasn't the case. I know people who are more than qualified with college degrees who have been looking for jobs for a year and a half.
Right.
One guy,
Well, because
one guy I
there's
know
all
literally
these
looking for two and a half years.
ghost jobs now too. It's like all these companies are putting out that they have positions open, but they're
Yeah,
not actually hiring.
yeah, which is weird. I don't. Is there a reason for that? I don't. Do you know the reason for that? Because I really don't
I heard
know.
some theories. It's like they're trying to like gauge the market in a way too, and then they're also like trying
Mm.
to just have resumes on file if they ever do want to hire people. But yeah, there's a weird phenomena that's been going on for like the last couple of years where they're just they're putting out positions that they're not really hiring for, not like eager to hire somebody for immediately.
And it's not even just private sector, even some government jobs, like I guess they would be considered private sector, like the like contract GS jobs. Like even those jobs that used to be very easy for military retirees to get, like those jobs are hard to get now.
Right.
Like nobody has extra money because really the majority of the country doesn't have extra money to spend. And that's the reality of it. And the money that the government is allocating towards military spending is going out the country.
Right.
So like so when I went back to visit in May, I was taken aback by the fact that I went to CVS to buy like 5 things and I spent like $120. I said, no. There must be something wrong here, bro. I need to redo that again. No, it was $120. I said, I bought 5 things. I bought like something for my dog. I bought like a hair, something for my hair. I'm like, this is are you kidding me? No wonder everybody's going to eat out or eat at McDonald's or Burger King. Hell, but
But
I
even
went
McDonald's
McDonald's or Burger.
costs like 20 something bucks.
Exactly. I asked my brother. I said, "Hey, yo, how are y'all surviving?" He's like, "Barely." Like, and he's in the military. He does okay for himself, but he's the type that budgets everything. And he's like, "Bro, there is never a month where my food budget hasn't gone up since." He's like, maybe for a year and a half. His food budget has gone up every single month for a year and a half.
Right.
It's unsustainable. There was one month where they got an energy bill for $375 and they thought it was a mistake. And they were like, no, it's not. And that's the reality of most Americans. And Kamala and Biden at the first half of the campaign spent an inordinate amount of time trying to convince people that everything was okay.
I know it's just like, don't believe your actual experience, right? Just believe what we're telling you. And it's absurd because, another thing too is household credit card debt has skyrocketed over this administration because people are just using their credit cards to buy food, so it was ridiculous and it didn't resonate. And
then they're
thankfully it
raising
was
the interest
repudiated by
rates.
the electorate.
Yeah, and they're raising the interest rates on like people are having to use it to buy food, increasing credit limits just to get by because they maybe once had great credit, and then like when that happens, like they just increase the rates. And a lot of credit cards don't even have to really tell you. I mean, they tell you, but like they don't have to get your permission to do it. So they once again when they were literally getting questions. I remember like during the debates, during a couple of interviews. They would get questions. People feel this way about the economy. They think the economy is horrible. What do you think about that? We're doing a great job. What are you talking about? Well, no, I'm telling you, the people that you're trying to get to vote for you say that the economy is horrible. So how do you feel about that? What do you plan on doing to address it? We already addressed it. The economy is great. Okay, so you're just not going to listen to anything that they're telling you. Your voters are telling you. They're giving you the answer to the test. They're telling you, you could have even come up with a legitimate reason. Hey, man, we're still in a pandemic recovery process. We still haven't fully recovered. We're on the way. Here are the mechanisms that we put in place to help further that process along. No, nothing like that. It was, the economy is great. Until Kamala realized that message was horrible. It wasn't working. It wasn't resonating. And obviously on the other side, Trump was willing and the Republicans were willing to address it. And then
it reminds me of there's a political cartoon where there's a homeless guy holding up a sign that says "I'm poor," and Biden's driving by in his limousine saying, "No, you're not."
That was basically it. Yeah. I mean, that was basically it. And hell, Kamala too. The thing about Trump was, and it's probably just not that he ran the 2016 campaign because Steve Bannon. It was very apparent that this was not the same campaign he ran in 2016. So let me be clear about that. But Trump has always had this willingness to call out problems very directly. If Americans tell him that they're pissed off about something that he perceives it, he will talk about it. It's pretty simple when you think about it. But I'm not saying he won't actually do anything about it. But sometimes people just want to be heard.
Right.
Like, don't gaslight me. Don't pretend like...
Don't censor people. Don't kick them off of platforms for talking about things.
Exactly. Like, even with the Hunter Biden situation, if I wanted to talk about Don Jr., if he did something corrupt, I would never be censored for it. Right. But I couldn't talk about Hunter Biden while he was in the middle of an intelligence committee investigation, while he was in the middle of a court hearing. Like in the middle of it, I'm getting censored. I'm like, but it's news. What are you talking about? Yeah,
but it's not just that too, right? It was COVID. It was the 2020 election. You weren't allowed to talk about that for a while. It was when Russia invaded Ukraine. A lot of views got censored there. So, and honestly, I think that also kind of shot Democrats in the foot because they were censoring conservatives off of YouTube and Facebook. They led to Elon Musk purchasing Twitter. A lot of people went over to Rumble as well, and obviously like Telegram and Parler and all these other things people were gravitating to for a while. So it forced people to look for alternative news sources, which just ended up discrediting the corporate media and that propaganda more because people were able to recognize that they were being lied to.
Yep, and it actually forced YouTube to some degree to actually open up their algorithm again, because I guess they were starting to lose money, or they were
Well,
getting
they
into
created
more.
a competitor to themselves, right? Like they left a lane open for Rumble, and
Exactly.
it's grown into like a viable platform now.
Yep. And Peter Thiel is one of the ones that bank. So it's like, if Peter Thiel's involved in something, we all know how that goes. Like, it's probably going to be successful. He just has that kind of money in that type of pool. So, and ironically, Peter Thiel was part of YouTube becoming YouTube. So whenever he became part of the Rumble team, it was obvious that they had a legitimate competitor. And then when he was able to bring on like Glenn Greenwald, Kim Iverson, a lot of the conservative popular guys, those voices, whether you like them or not, were offering alternative thoughts and opinions that a lot of people hadn't heard before. And they were being driven there because YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok were censoring. And I think, like, I agree, that probably hurt a lot of people, because those people, they talk. They talk to their friends, they talk to their families, they take that information to other platforms, information that these people otherwise wouldn't get, and it spreads. And there's only so much that a bot can do to stop information from getting to real people. You know what I'm saying? Like, the bots are there, in my opinion, to control the algorithm, because I do believe that there's a real life implication to algorithm manipulation, because perception is reality. So and unfortunately, Democrats tend to drink their own Kool-Aid, right? There are a lot of Democrats that were surprised that at the result, a lot of them being in DC. I think in DC, 77% of them voted for Kamala. And like, they clearly are not aligned with the rest of the country. But why did y'all think that it was okay to vote for Kamala? Why did y'all think that she was a good candidate? Who thought it was a good idea to put her up as a candidate and allow this process to be rigged to nominate her without a real electoral process, or at least having the delegates have a public conversation about it? And it was because, well, the algorithm said that everybody loves Kamala and that they were cool with it, and everybody hates Trump. That's what the algorithm said.
Right.
And they go out and repeat those talking points. And they believe that as long as they go out and repeat it, other people will feel the public and peer pressure to align themselves with those talking points. But a lot of people are kind of like, even disillusioned with social media. They're not going to social media. They're not going to CNN necessarily. Or if they do go to social media, they're going with intention. They're going to look up information for themselves in determining what's real and what's not. They're not going to be fed information, which is what the default was a few years back.
Right. Well, one last thing I wanted to talk about was the performance of third parties, because again, we talked about the genocide a little bit, and obviously Jill Stein ran on this. Jill Stein didn't really have a great night on Tuesday. I mean, she did better than Howie Hawkins, because he was a terrible candidate, but under a million votes, pretty much in line with how Greens typically perform. So what do you think explains this? Why do you think that all these anti-genocide folks just didn't pull the lever for Jill Stein?
So there's the fact that she did have to compete with Cornel West in a few states, and even RFK, I feel like. But the New York rule change screwed her. Them changing the rules for how you qualify for the state ballot right as she was like, right before the deadline. So it's basically, you have to pay or be a Democrat or Republican to get on that ballot, which is how RFK was actually able to do it. He paid, but he damn near went broke to do it. Then her being disqualified from Ohio illegitimately at the last minute. So who knows how many votes she would have gotten there. Then her being disqualified from Georgia illegitimately. Actually, her and Cornel West got disqualified from Georgia. So those are several.
Because the Democrats believe in democracy so much that they're fighting in court to keep third-party candidates off the ballot.
Exactly. Right. That's what it comes down to, is that we don't live in a democracy, representative or otherwise. We have an illusion of choice, regardless of what people think. I would say that the only thing that you can think of positively about Trump winning, outside of Kamala losing, is the fact that it's like, we know how popular he was, right? We know he increased his voter demographic amongst all demographics except for white men last election. We know how popular Kamala was, and that this is the result that if anybody, like, if we're just looking at straight logic, this is the result that we should have expected. So maybe if we continue to bring attention to our electoral system might be salvageable. It's not completely gone where we can't do anything about it, but that does not mean it's legitimate. And we need to figure out a way to make third parties viable, because when you can just disqualify, because like, yeah, maybe, right? Jill Stein, the Green Party, sue Georgia, they sue Ohio, they win. What does that do? They get some money, right? Okay. That doesn't bring those votes. You can't go back to November 5th, give them those votes, and then get that federal funding that comes from those votes. It's already happened. So that's the problem. It's like every time they make genuine gains, like in 2016, where Jill Stein did extremely well, she was punished for it for like the next 4 to 6 years.
Yeah, they're still calling her a Russian agent from RT dinner a decade ago.
Remember, she was brought to the Senate, they brought her in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, held her up for like 4 years, drained all her campaign funding, even put her into debt because of that investigation. Of course, they found nothing. But the point was, how dare you try to challenge a two-party system? That's what it was. It was to make sure that they couldn't challenge the two-party system. It was to punish her for doing so. And it was also to make sure that they could not use any of that leverage and momentum that they gained from 2016 to be a problem going forward. And to some degree that they were successful because Jill Stein basically had to kind of start all over again. And that's what keeps happening. Anytime they do make legitimate gains, they screw them. So we don't have a democracy. That's why you have Trump and Kamala as options. Why they are so audacious to put up Kamala as an option, even though you have a candidate as great as Jill Stein running for office. Because, like, yeah, we know she's great. In a fair fight, Jill would stomp Kamala, but this ain't going to be fair. So that's something we got to wrestle with as a nation too. And I feel like we don't really have that conversation enough. Yeah, Jill did poorly, or the other conversation that people have, oh, but she's not viable. You want to explain to me why a whole ass party isn't viable and why you're okay with it? I don't care what party it is. Libertarians too, they're not viable. Why not? Oh, because you know how the system works. Like, oh, you're okay with that then. You're okay with the fact that the system purposely rigs elections against parties, every party except for two. You're fine with that. You think you live in a democracy with that situation being the case.
I think it's, worth noting too, kind of how Republicans treated libertarians differently this election, because Trump actually went to the Libertarian Convention. So I believe RFK Jr. did as well. We had the New Hampshire Libertarian Party actually end up endorsing Trump over their own candidate. And the Libertarian candidate actually did historically bad this election. He came in 5th place behind RFK Jr., who wasn't, even an active candidate anymore. So this was actually the first election since 2000 that Greens came in 3rd place. So, but
Trump was they actually build a coalition. I know it sounds crazy to say, but he was open about it. I don't know how genuine he meant that. Like, I don't know if it was just vote, like just trying to get the votes, but he was like, no, we're trying to build a coalition. And he was very upfront about it. He's like, hey man, we like you guys. We like RFK. We want your voters. Tulsi, we want your voters. Like he was, and maybe he was being genuine. I don't know, but that was the opposite of what the Democrats did. The Democrats, if you're not with us, you're a Nazi.
Yeah, exactly. They hate the Greens. You have John Fetterman actually now blaming the Pennsylvania Senate race. He's blaming the Green Party candidate there, and he's calling Greens dipshits. So like they just hate the Greens, whereas the Republicans actually reached out to libertarians and seemingly won over a bunch of libertarian voters.
Yeah, they did. And those RFK Jr. voters, a lot of them they were not politically active before RFK. A lot of them. And I ain't gonna lie, he got a lot of people involved. And a lot of them went over to vote for Trump in the states that they needed to do so. Like, you don't think that him being willing to reach out to RFK, put his pride to the side and say, you're not a threat, I can make you an ally. And apparently he's even, I guess he's going to honor his word about giving him a position in the cabinet, which I wasn't expecting. Which is like, I guess for the RFK people, that's dope. That's good that Trump is actually honoring his word there. But like, the Democrats
and some libertarians too, they're talking about giving Ron Paul some position in the government. Thomas Massey they're talking about as well. So
wow. Thomas Massey deserves one for sure. He needs to be somewhere. I don't know what.
I think they're talking about agriculture for him.
Oh yeah, that'd be great for him. That'd be great for him. Like but that's how you win, building coalitions, right? Because at the end of the day, there's always going to be some resistance to the duopoly to some degree. And if there's a minimal level of resistance comparatively because they don't have that level of power, what do you think makes more sense? Appeal to those people so that you can beat the real opposition, or at least their perceived real opposition, or like piss those people off while you're screwing them over and screwing your own base over. Because like, yeah, to some degree, Trump screws over his own base. We know that. But like, at least he like, I'm gonna make sure I can build a bigger tent to make sure that if I do screw over my own base, I got other people who are willing to vote for me. That's not what the Democrats did. Democrats go screw over their own base and then be like, and Green Party, we hate y'all too. And the Socialist Party, we hate y'all too. It's like, well, then who's left to vote for you?
Right. Well, again, that just goes back to, I think that they're like these snobby academic elitists and they just hate everybody else and it shows, and they're alienating most of the country.
They hate us, man. They hate us. That's the only way I can think of this. They hate us. Doesn't it feel like that? Have you seen some of these comments?
It's very clear. I mean, just go again, just go on Twitter, or just you could go back to looking at how the news was talking about the election prior to Tuesday. Like, they just hate the working class, and they lie to them and gaslight them and talk down to them and tell them to shut up. And it didn't work in this election.
It's like, sorry for existing, guys. We're sorry. Like, I do gotta get up out of here though, man. But you have one more question?
No, I was gonna say I appreciate your time today. Sorry I kept you a little bit late. For folks out there who would like to follow you and support you, how can they do that?
You can follow me on Twitter at Real Niko House, on Instagram at Real Niko House. On YouTube, you can type in Niko House or look up For the People podcast. And I'm on TikTok as well. And you can follow Hotspot, where we break down a bunch of news every single day on Twitter. No, we don't have Instagram anymore. They took us down. But yeah, on Twitter, me, Nick Cruz. We also post a lot of the breaking news that's happening throughout the day there as well. So follow us on Hotspot at Hotspot, all one word.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Niko. I really appreciate it, and hopefully I can have you back on again sometime soon.
Appreciate you, man. Enjoy the combo.